Clara had worked in the Hale mansion for nearly 7 years. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, polished the marble floors, ironed the boys' uniforms, and made sure every corner of the grand house gleamed like new. To most people, she was just the maid, quiet, polite, and always busy. But to 6-year-old twins Leo and Liam, she was something more. She was the one who tied their shoelaces, read them bedtime stories when their father was too busy, and made sure their pancakes always had smiley faces on them. Their father, Richard Hale, was one of the richest men in the city, a tech billionaire whose name appeared on magazines and business news every other week. He loved his sons deeply but rarely had time to spend with them. His schedule was filled with meetings, flights, and conferences. So whenever he needed someone to take care of the boys, it was Clara who stepped forward without hesitation. That morning was supposed to be like any other. The sky outside the mansion was bright and blue, and the boys were already full of energy before breakfast. Clara could hear them running down the long hallway, their laughter echoing through the marble walls. She smiled as she entered the dining room carrying a tray of freshly baked muffins. "Good morning, Miss Clara," Leo shouted, climbing onto his chair. Liam followed quietly, rubbing his eyes but smiling when she placed a muffin in front of him. "Good morning, my little gentleman," Clara said, setting down their orange juice. "Now eat properly, both of you." Just as she was clearing the table, Mr. Hale entered the room talking on his phone. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his suit perfectly pressed as always. He ended the call and looked at Clara. "Clara, I need a small favor," he said in his usual calm but hurried voice. "I have an unexpected meeting today. Can you take the boys out for a while? Maybe to the mall. Let them have some fun." Clara froze for a second. The mall? That was not part of her usual routine. The twins could be a handful even inside the mansion. Taking them out in public sounded terrifying. "Of course, sir," she finally said, trying to hide her nervousness. "I'll take good care of them." Mr. Hale nodded, gave each boy a quick pat on the head, and left for work. Within an hour, Clara had the twins dressed, red t-shirts, denim shorts, and sneakers. She herself wore her usual maid uniform. She didn't have other clothes that felt appropriate for going out. But she made sure the boys looked neat and clean. Before they left, Leo whispered to his brother, "Do you think we can get ice cream?" Liam giggled. "Only if Miss Clara says yes." When the car dropped them off at the city mall, Clara held both their hands tightly. The glass ceiling of the building reflected the sunlight beautifully, and the air was filled with the sound of footsteps, chatter, and soft music. The boys' eyes widened. The place was huge, shiny, and full of colors. "Stay close to me," Clara said, glancing around nervously. She wasn't used to such crowds. People passed by carrying shopping bags, and she felt out of place in her maid's outfit. But the twins didn't seem to notice. They were too busy staring at the giant fountain that shot streams of water high into the air. "Wow," Leo shouted. "It's like magic water." Liam clapped his hands, and Clara couldn't help smiling. Maybe this outing wasn't such a bad idea after all. They walked through the stores, stopping to look at toy cars and teddy bears. Leo wanted to touch everything while Liam quietly observed, his big eyes full of wonder. Every time Leo tried to run ahead, Clara gently held his shoulder and reminded him to stay close. "Let's take a break," she said after a while. "You boys must be tired." They found a bench near the center of the mall, right next to a large black grand piano. Its surface shone like glass under the skylight. Clara looked at it and smiled. It reminded her of the old piano in her grandmother's house, though she had never learned to play. Leo stared at it curiously. "Can I touch it?" he asked, eyes wide. "Oh no, sweetheart," Clara said quickly. "That's not a toy." It's probably very expensive, but Leo didn't move. He just stood there, fascinated by the instrument. The piano seemed to call to him, its open lid reflecting the bright ceiling above, the smooth keys waiting silently. Liam came beside him just as curious. Clara sighed softly. She knew that look. The boys weren't going to forget about it easily. "All right," she said at last, "but only one little touch. Then we go get ice cream, agreed?" The twins nodded eagerly. Leo climbed onto the stool, his small legs dangling above the floor. He pressed a single white key and a clear, beautiful note filled the air. It echoed through the open space like a tiny piece of magic. Liam giggled and pressed another key. Together they made random sounds, soft, clumsy, but somehow sweet. A few people walking by turned their heads and smiled. Clara felt her heart beat faster. Should she stop them? What if the mall manager came? But the twins were laughing, and the sound of their innocent joy mixed perfectly with the music they created. For the first time that day, Clara relaxed. Watching them, she forgot about her worries, about her uniform, her place, and her fear of doing something wrong. She saw only two little boys discovering something new and beautiful. As the soft notes floated through the air, the moment felt simple yet magical. None of them knew that this small act of curiosity was about to change everything. For the twins, for Clara, and even for the people who would soon gather around them. It all began with an ordinary outing that turned into something unforgettable. Leo's laughter still echoed softly as his fingers slid across the piano keys, the sound dancing through the open air of the mall. Shoppers paused for a moment, smiling at the sight. Two little boys in red shirts standing beside a grand black piano that looked far too elegant for their small hands. Clara stood a few steps away, her heart both proud and anxious. She had promised only one little touch, but it was clear the twins were too fascinated to stop now. Leo's energy was unstoppable. His golden hair caught the light from the skylight above, and his face glowed with excitement. He pressed one key after another, creating a random mix of high and low notes. Each sound seemed to fill him with more confidence. His twin brother Liam stayed close, quieter, watching his brother first before copying him carefully. Liam was always the gentler one, thoughtful, shy, and observant. Where Leo rushed forward, Liam waited, studied, and then followed in his own quiet way. Clara took a deep breath, glancing around. The crowd wasn't big yet, but a few people had stopped nearby. Some took out their phones. She felt her stomach twist a little. Oh dear, what if someone complains? She thought. The boys didn't notice her worry at all. They were in their own little world. Leo looked at Liam and said, "Let's make a song." "But I don't know how," Liam replied softly. "Me neither," Leo said, grinning. "We can just make one up." Clara couldn't help but smile at that. There was something magical in their confidence, that innocent belief that anything was possible. Leo tapped a steady rhythm, and Liam joined in with lighter notes. The random sounds began to form a strange, beautiful pattern. It wasn't real music, but it had something pure in it. The sound of joy, of childhood, of discovery. A few shoppers clapped quietly, amused by the twins' performance. One elderly woman whispered to her husband, "They're adorable." Another man set down his coffee cup and took a short video. The mall, usually filled with hurried footsteps and the buzz of chatter, seemed to slow down for a moment. Clara's hands fidgeted with the edge of her apron. She wanted to stop them, but she couldn't. There was something in that moment that felt right, something too beautiful to interrupt. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them. "Mind if I join?" Clara turned, startled. A young man stood there with an electric guitar slung over his shoulder. He had been setting up for a scheduled mall performance nearby, but had clearly been drawn in by the twins' spontaneous music. He smiled warmly, crouching down to their level. Leo's eyes widened. "You have a real guitar." The man chuckled. "Sure do. Looks like you two have a good beat going." Liam looked up nervously. "Are we allowed to do this?" The man winked. "I think music should always be allowed." He strummed a gentle chord, soft and smooth, matching their rhythm. The sound blended beautifully with the piano, deep, rich, and full of life. Clara's lips parted slightly in surprise. She had expected trouble, a mall guard perhaps, or someone telling them to stop. But instead, she saw something wonderful happening right before her eyes. Leo began to tap the keys in rhythm with the guitar, and Liam followed with soft notes that danced around the melody. The man nodded to them, guiding the tempo without saying a word. Shoppers gathered in a semicircle now, drawn by the unlikely trio. Two blonde boys in matching clothes, a friendly guitarist, and a maid who stood nearby with wide eyes and a trembling smile. The song built up slowly. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes Leo's rhythm stumbled and Liam hit the wrong key. But no one cared. The music carried a warmth that no practiced tune could match. It was honest, full of joy and alive. A small girl holding an ice cream cone started clapping along. Then others joined. A group of teenagers stopped to record, whispering, "This is so cute." Clara felt her heart swell. She couldn't remember the last time she had seen such pure happiness. The twins, usually so restless and noisy at home, looked focused, connected to each other in a way she hadn't seen before. Leo's usual boldness had softened into joy, while Liam's shyness melted away in the melody. The guitarist smiled at her and whispered, "They've got talent." Clara shook her head quickly. "They're just playing," she said shyly. "Sometimes," the man replied, "that's where real music begins." The final note echoed through the open space, fading slowly. For a second, the mall was silent, and then applause burst out. People clapped, cheered, and even whistled. Clara's face turned red as she looked around, unsure what to do. The twins froze for a moment, surprised, then grinned from ear to ear. "They liked it," Leo shouted. Liam giggled and whispered, "We made music." Clara laughed softly, tears of pride forming in her eyes. She stepped forward and gently took their hands. "You both were wonderful," she said, her voice shaking. "Now let's thank everyone and go get that ice cream, yes?" The crowd slowly dispersed, but a few people stayed back to compliment them. One woman told Clara, "They're amazing, you should get them lessons." Another added, "This was the sweetest thing I've seen all day." As they walked away, the boys still humming their tune, Clara looked back at the piano. For her, it was no longer just an instrument. It had become a moment, a memory she would never forget. She didn't know that someone had captured the whole scene on video. She didn't know that within hours it would spread online like wildfire, with people around the world smiling at the sight of two little boys making music beside a humble maid. All she knew, as they walked toward the ice cream shop, was that something had changed. Quietly, beautifully. In that bright afternoon at the mall, Leo's fingers hesitated above the piano keys as if he could feel the sound waiting beneath them. The moment seemed to stretch in time, the shining floor beneath him, the high glass ceiling above, and the curious eyes of people pausing to see what would happen next. Then, with the courage that only a 6-year-old could have, he pressed a single white key. A soft, ringing note echoed through the mall. It was clear and bright, floating in the air like a tiny bird. Leo blinked in surprise, then grinned. The sound was beautiful. He pressed another key, a lower one, and the two tones blended together. He laughed, delighted by the magic he had just created. Liam stood beside him, watching closely. Unlike his brother, he wasn't sure what to do. His shy eyes flicked from the piano to Clara, who stood a few steps away, clutching her bag nervously. She wanted to tell them to stop, but her voice wouldn't come out. The boys weren't causing harm, they were just exploring. And something about that first note had touched her heart. Leo looked over his shoulder and said, "Liam, come on. It sounds nice." Liam bit his lip. "Are you sure we won't get in trouble?" Leo shrugged, still smiling. "Just try one." Cautiously, Liam reached out and pressed a black key. The sound was deeper, darker. But when Leo added another note, the two together made a lovely little tune. It wasn't planned, it wasn't perfect, but it was pure. Clara found herself smiling before she realized it. The twins began experimenting, their tiny fingers creating random notes that somehow made sense. Leo played quickly with energy and excitement, while Liam followed softly, balancing his brother's rhythm. It was as if they had done this before, not on a piano, but in the way they always did everything together. A few passers-by started to slow down. Some smiled at the sight. Others took out their phones to capture the moment. The music wasn't professional, but there was something about it that made people stop. Maybe the innocence of it. Or maybe the rare sound of joy in such a busy place. The mall's usual noise, the buzz of voices, footsteps and background music, began to fade behind the twins' spontaneous melody. The boys didn't notice the small crowd forming. They were too caught up in their discovery. Leo began to hum a tune and Liam joined in softly, their laughter mixing with the music. Clara finally stepped closer, whispering, "All right, boys, that's enough now. People are watching." Leo looked up at her, his blue eyes shining. "But listen, it sounds happy, doesn't it?" She opened her mouth to scold him gently, but then she heard it. The simple pattern they were playing had somehow become beautiful. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was music, innocent, unplanned, but full of feeling. Clara's lips parted in wonder. She hadn't felt something like this in years. That strange warmth in her chest, the one that came from witnessing something pure and unexpected. She forgot for a moment that she was wearing her uniform, that she was supposed to be the careful, responsible adult. Leo's small hand brushed the keys again, and the sound rose and fell softly. Liam added another note, smiling shyly when it fit perfectly. They looked at each other, eyes sparkling as if they'd just unlocked a secret. "See, Miss Clara," Leo said proudly. "We made music together." Clara chuckled. "Yes, I suppose you did." By now a few people had gathered around. Some clapped quietly after each little tune, encouraging the boys. A mother with a stroller whispered to her child, "Look, sweetie, they're playing together." A young couple held hands and smiled, caught up in the moment. Then something unexpected happened. An old man who had been sitting nearby with a walking stick slowly stood and approached them. He wore a brown hat and a gentle smile. "Mind if I show you something?" he asked kindly. Leo looked at Clara, who gave a small nod. The man sat down beside the boys and placed his wrinkled fingers on the piano. He played a few soft chords, rich, deep, and smooth. The sound filled the air with warmth. The boys watched, fascinated, their mouths slightly open. "Try this," the old man said, playing a simple melody with one hand. Leo and Liam copied him eagerly. Within minutes, the three of them were playing together, one guiding, two following. The small crowd around them clapped in rhythm. Clara felt a lump in her throat. It was such a simple thing, music in a mall, but the moment carried something magical. It wasn't planned, it wasn't practiced, but it felt important. When the old man finished, he patted Leo's shoulder and smiled. "You've got a good ear, young man. And your brother, too." Leo grinned proudly while Liam blushed and whispered, "Thank you." The man tipped his hat to Clara. "You've got something special there," he said before walking away. Clara watched him disappear into the crowd, her eyes misty. She looked at the twins, their cheeks red with excitement, their eyes shining. She couldn't help thinking how rare it was to witness such a genuine moment, a spark of something real in a world always rushing. As they left the piano, Leo looked up at her and said, "Do you think Daddy will like our song?" Clara smiled and brushed a bit of hair from his forehead. "I think he'll love it," she said softly. The boys skipped ahead, hand in hand, still humming the tune they'd just created. And Clara followed behind, feeling lighter than she had in years, unaware that this small, beautiful moment would soon reach far beyond the walls of that mall. The soft music had barely faded before the sound of clapping filled the air. A handful of people had gathered around the piano, some smiling, some recording, and some simply standing still, listening. Clara stood frozen, unsure whether to step forward or step back. She had taken the twins out for a simple afternoon, a bit of shopping, a walk, maybe some ice cream. Yet now here they were, turning the center of a busy mall into something magical. Leo glanced up, startled by the applause. Then, realizing people were cheering for him, he grinned widely, his small chest puffed with pride. Liam, on the other hand, looked down, his fingers curling nervously. The sudden attention made him shy, but there was a tiny smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The quiet joy of being seen. Maybe for the first time. From across the atrium, a man carrying a guitar case stopped walking. He was supposed to perform later that day as part of the mall's weekend entertainment lineup. But the sound he'd just heard, raw, innocent, and oddly moving, made him pause. He set his guitar case down and watched the twins for a moment, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. The boys had no idea who was watching them. Leo kept experimenting with sounds, pressing keys with both hands now. The melody wasn't perfect. Some notes clashed, others blended, but it had a charm that couldn't be taught. Liam added his own touches, trying to copy his brother's rhythm but adding softer, gentler tones. Together they created something that felt alive. The guitarist approached with a smile. "Hey, you two," he said kindly. "That sounds pretty good." Leo looked up. "Really?" "Really," the man said, kneeling beside them. "You've got great timing. Mind if I join in?" Liam blinked. "Join, like, play with us?" The man opened his case and pulled out a sleek electric guitar, its metallic surface shining under the bright lights. He plugged it into a small portable amp he carried for performances. Then he strummed a few soft notes, warm and smooth, blending perfectly with the boys' piano sounds. Clara's mouth fell open slightly. She looked around nervously. What was this, even allowed? But before she could say a word, the sound changed completely. The guitar added life and rhythm to the twins' tune. What was once a playful experiment now sounded like a real song. Leo's eyes sparkled with excitement. Whoa, it sounds cooler now. Liam nodded shyly, his small hands following the beat. The guitarist smiled at them encouragingly, strumming along in perfect harmony. That's it, keep going, he said. Just play what you feel. Just play what you feel. The crowd grew. People passing by stopped, drawn by the unusual sight. A young musician and two little boys playing together beside a maid who looked both amazed and terrified. Phones were lifted, cameras recorded. Someone whispered, "Who are they?" Another person said softly, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" The music filled the open atrium like sunlight. It wasn't perfect, it was real. The twins weren't trying to impress anyone. They were simply enjoying the sound, the rhythm, the freedom. Leo swayed a little, caught up in the melody, while Liam smiled faintly, losing his fear note by note. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to pull them away, to say, "That's enough, boys. Let's go." But something stopped her. Maybe it was the happiness on their faces, or the way the music seemed to lift the weight off her shoulders for just a moment. She had never seen them this alive before. The guitarist caught her eye and smiled. "They're naturals," he said softly. "You must be proud," Clara blushed. "Oh, I'm not their mother," she said quickly. "I'm just their—" But before she could finish, Leo interrupted with a bright grin. "She's our best friend," he declared proudly. The crowd laughed softly and Clara felt warmth rise to her cheeks. It wasn't true in a technical sense. She was their maid, their caretaker. But in that instant, hearing those words from Leo, she realized it was true in another way. The guitarist played one last shimmering chord, and the boys hit their final notes almost in sync. The music hung in the air for a few seconds before fading. Then came the applause, louder, fuller this time. People clapped, cheered, even whistled. The sound echoed through the mall. Leo jumped off the piano bench and waved happily at the crowd. Liam hid behind Clara's skirt, his cheeks red but his eyes shining with pride. "Bravo," someone shouted. "Encore," said another. The guitarist chuckled and leaned down to the twins. "You two made a lot of people smile today," he said. "That's what real musicians do." Leo's face lit up. "Then we're real musicians." Liam giggled softly, holding Clara's hand. As the crowd began to scatter, people stopped to thank them, compliment them, and pat the boys on the head. Clara didn't know what to say. She just smiled, still a little dazed. The guitarist gave her a small nod before walking off toward his stage area, leaving behind the echo of the song they had created together. The twins turned to her, their eyes bright with pride and joy. "Did you see them, Miss Clara?" "They were clapping for us," Leo said, bouncing on his heels. "I saw," she replied, her voice warm and gentle. "You both were wonderful." As they walked away from the piano, Clara glanced back one last time. The keys still gleamed under the mall lights, but now they seemed different, as if holding a secret memory only she and the boys would understand. She didn't know that people's phones had captured the entire performance. She didn't know that within a few hours, millions would see those smiling faces and hear that simple, joyful tune. All she knew as she led the twins toward the ice cream shop was that something special had happened, something pure, something unforgettable. And deep down, for the first time in a long while, Clara felt that she, too, had been part of something extraordinary. Clara stood completely still, her hands clasped together, her heart still racing from what had just happened. The applause had faded, the small crowd had slowly dispersed, and yet the sound of that music, the melody her boys had created with the kind guitarist, still echoed in her ears. She could hardly believe what she had just witnessed. The twins walked beside her now, each holding an ice cream cone, their faces glowing with joy. Leo, as usual, was talking nonstop, replaying every detail. "Did you see, Miss Clara? Everyone was clapping. Even that man with the big hat," he said excitedly. Liam nodded between licks of his chocolate ice cream. "And the guitar sounded so nice. It made our song sound real." Clara smiled, though her throat felt tight. "It was real, Liam. You both made real music today." They sat down at a small table near the fountain, the gentle splashes of water mixing with the chatter of people passing by. Clara took a deep breath, watching the twins enjoy their treat. She still couldn't shake the image from her mind, the two of them at the piano, smiling, confident, alive. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She had worked in the Hale mansion for years, seen these boys grow from tiny babies into curious little humans. She had bandaged scraped knees, cleaned up spilled paint, and chased them around endless hallways. But this was different. She had just seen a side of them that even their father had never seen. Something unpolished, pure, and full of heart. For a moment, she forgot she was wearing her maid's uniform. She forgot the glances from fancy shoppers who probably wondered why a housemaid was sitting in the middle of an upscale mall with two children who clearly didn't belong to her. None of it mattered. Leo leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Miss Clara, do you think Daddy will be mad?" She looked at him, surprised. "Mad? Why would he be mad?" "Well," he hesitated, glancing down at his ice cream. "We touched something expensive, and we made noise, and you said not to." Clara's heart softened. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently. "Sometimes breaking a small rule is all right if it brings something good. You didn't do anything wrong today. You made people happy." Liam smiled shyly. "Really?" She nodded. "Really." At that moment, she realized how much these boys needed something like this. Something that wasn't planned or managed. Something that wasn't inside the cold walls of their mansion. Their father gave them everything money could buy. Toys, gadgets, tutors. But not moments like this. She looked at their faces again, both sticky with ice cream and sunlight, and her chest filled with warmth. She wasn't their mother, but in many ways she had raised them more closely than anyone else, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel proud. Not just of them, but of herself too. She had kept them safe, taught them kindness, and today, unknowingly, she had given them a stage. As she sat there, an older woman who had watched the performance earlier walked past and smiled. "They were wonderful, dear," the woman said kindly. "You must be so proud of your boys." Clara blushed. "Oh, they're not mine," she said quickly, almost out of habit. But the woman just smiled knowingly. "Doesn't matter," she said softly. The love in your eyes said otherwise. Clara couldn't reply. The woman walked away before she could find the words, leaving her heart strangely full. She turned back to the twins, who were now feeding the last bits of their cones to the pigeons near the fountain. Leo laughed when one bold pigeon hopped onto his shoe. "It's hungry, Miss Clara. Don't let it eat your laces," she said, laughing. It felt good to laugh again, freely, without worry or rules. For the first time in a long while, she felt like more than a maid. She wasn't just there to clean, cook, or follow instructions. She was part of these children's lives. The laughter, the music, the small moments that made their days bright. As they prepared to leave, Leo suddenly said, "Miss Clara, I want to play the piano again. Can we come back tomorrow?" Liam nodded eagerly. "Please? We can make a new song." Clara chuckled, fixing Leo's shirt collar. "Maybe another day, little maestros. Today was special enough." The boys sighed dramatically but didn't argue. She held their hands again as they walked toward the exit. The golden afternoon sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, bathing them in warmth. People they passed along the way still looked at them, smiling, recognizing them as the little pianists from earlier. A few even waved. Clara noticed but said nothing. She simply squeezed the boys' hands tighter, silently proud. As they stepped outside, the wind brushed gently against her face. She glanced up at the sky and whispered to herself, "Maybe I did something right today." She didn't know that the videos were already spreading online. She didn't know that people around the world were already sharing it with captions like, "Two little boys and their maid made my day," or "Kindness and music in its purest form." All she knew was that, for the first time in years, she felt seen, not by her employer, not by society, but by life itself. And in that simple, sunlit walk back to the car, Clara carried a quiet pride she'd never felt before. Not the pride of wealth or recognition, but the deep, honest pride of knowing she had helped two little hearts discover something beautiful inside themselves. By the time Clara and the twins reached home that evening, the sun was dipping low over the Hale estate, painting the mansion's white walls in soft shades of gold. The boys were still buzzing with excitement, retelling the same story over and over. Who clapped, what song they made, how the man with the guitar smiled at them. Clara just listened, smiling quietly. Her heart was full, her mind still replaying the sound of those piano notes that had filled the mall earlier. She helped the twins wash up and change into their pajamas, then tucked them into their soft beds. Leo kept talking even as his eyes drooped with sleep. "Miss Clara," he murmured, "do you think we can play again next time we go out?" "Maybe," she said softly, brushing his hair from his forehead. "If the piano's still there." "I liked it," Liam whispered from the other bed. It made people happy. Clara smiled gently. Yes, it did. It made me happy too, gently. Yes, it did. It made me happy too. Soon both boys drifted off to sleep, their small faces calm and content. Clara turned off the lamp and stood for a moment watching them. There was a strange feeling in her heart, a quiet warmth mixed with something she couldn't name. Pride, maybe. Or gratitude, or both. She didn't know that the world outside their mansion was already watching their story unfold. Across town, in hundreds of homes, people were smiling at a video that had just started spreading online. It was titled "Maid's Little Musician Stunned Them All" crowd. The clip showed the twins sitting at the piano, laughing, playing, and then the guitarist joining in. The angle caught Clara too, standing a few steps behind, one hand over her mouth, eyes wide with emotion. In the comments, people wrote things like, "This made me cry." Pure innocence in a world full of noise. The maid's expression says everything. Beautiful moment. By midnight, the video had already been shared thousands of times. Strangers on the internet argued over who the children were, who the woman was, where it happened. Some called the boys the little pianists, while others nicknamed them the twin prodigies. Clara had no idea any of this was happening. She was asleep, exhausted but happy, unaware that her name, though not yet known, was being spoken by millions. The next morning, her day began like every other. She woke before sunrise, made breakfast, and started tidying the house. The twins were still asleep, their laughter from yesterday echoing faintly in her memory. She smiled as she polished the dining table, humming the tune they had played. But then her phone buzzed, a message from a friend who worked at the local cafe. "Clara." "Is that you in this video?" Confused, Clara clicked the link. The moment it opened, her heart stopped. There she was on screen, standing by the piano in her maid uniform, watching Leo and Liam play with the guitarist. She saw herself laugh, saw the crowd clapping, saw the boys smiling. Her eyes widened. "How did this get online?" she thought, frozen. The video already had hundreds of thousands of views. She scrolled through the comments, her hands trembling slightly. Such a sweet woman. She must be proud of those boys. The world needs more moments like this. Clara didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She wasn't used to attention. She'd always lived quietly, unnoticed. Now strangers around the world were talking about her, calling her kind, calling her special. It felt strange, but it also felt good. As she stood there, lost in thought, her phone buzzed again. This time, a call from Mr. Hale's assistant. "Clara," the voice said quickly. "Mr. Hale would like to see you in his office right away." Her heart skipped. "Is something wrong?" "I'm not sure," the assistant replied. "He just said it's important." Clara wiped her hands nervously on her apron and made her way down the long marble hallway. Mr. Hale's office door was open. He sat behind his large desk, staring at a tablet screen. He looked up as she entered. "Clara," he said slowly, "did you take the boys to the mall yesterday?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice small. "You asked me to?" He nodded. "I did." "And this?" He turned the tablet toward her, showing the video. "Is from that trip, I assume?" Clara froze. Her throat went dry. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "They saw a piano. They only wanted to touch it. Then a man joined in. I'm so sorry if—" But Mr. Hale raised his hand gently, stopping her. "Don't apologize," he said quietly. "I've watched this 5 times already." She blinked, confused. He leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his face, the first genuine one she had seen in years. "Clara, I had no idea my boys could play like that, or that they could bring people so much joy." Clara hesitated. "They don't really know how to play, sir. They were just exploring." He nodded slowly. "Yes, but sometimes that's how the best things start." For a moment the room was silent except for the ticking of the clock. Then he said, "Thank you, Clara. I think they needed that. Maybe I did too." Her eyes widened slightly. "Me, sir?" "Yes," he said, his voice soft. "You gave them a moment I never could. A normal, happy day. I'm grateful." Clara felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever thanked her like that before. She nodded quietly, unsure what to say. As she left the office, she glanced at the boys' photo on the wall, smiling, innocent, unaware of how much they had changed things. She walked back toward the kitchen, her heart full. The video, the applause, the music, all of it had started as a simple outing. But now it had become something bigger. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that the world had seen something real in that moment. Something that couldn't be planned or bought. Something made of love, laughter, and a piano's gentle song. When Richard Hale watched the video, he didn't move for nearly a full minute. The bright light from his tablet screen reflected in his eyes as he replayed the clip, again and again. The piano, the laughter, the tiny hands pressing keys with excitement, the crowd clapping, the maid standing in the background, one hand over her heart, her face filled with quiet pride. He had been sitting in his office at the top of the Hale Tower when the video had first been sent to him by a colleague. The message said, "Isn't this your family? It's going viral." At first, he thought it was a mistake. But as soon as he saw Leo and Liam on that screen, their identical faces glowing with happiness, something inside him shifted. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen them smile like that. Not the polite smiles they gave him at breakfast or the quick ones before bedtime, but real smiles, the kind that came from joy, not habit. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of silence pressing around him. The office was large and cold, filled with success, framed awards, glass walls, sleek furniture. Yet at that moment, all of it felt empty. His assistant peeked in through the door. "Sir, are you all right?" Richard nodded slowly, eyes still fixed on the screen. "Do you know who took them to the mall?" "Yes, sir, Clara." Of course, Clara. The woman who had been in his household for years, quiet, loyal, dependable. He'd always thought of her as part of the background of his life, someone who kept things running smoothly while he built his empire. He had never imagined that she would be the one to show him something this profound. He replayed the video once more, this time watching Clara, the way she looked at the boys, with care, with admiration, almost like a mother. And when the crowd began to clap, the way her eyes glistened with pride, she didn't step forward to take credit. She just stood there, smiling softly, letting the boys have their moment. It struck him deeply. For years, he had believed that providing the best of everything, the finest tutors, the biggest house, the most expensive toys, was enough. He had given them every comfort except the one thing that couldn't be bought: time. And yet, in a few short minutes, Clara had given them more than he had in months: laughter, connection, and music. He rubbed his temple, suddenly feeling the exhaustion he had ignored for so long. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stood and said quietly, "Tell Clara I'd like to see her and the boys after lunch." A few hours later, the twins came running into his study, their laughter echoing through the marble halls. "Daddy!" Leo shouted, jumping onto the couch. "Did you see us play?" Everyone clapped. Liam followed, a little more shy but grinning ear to ear. "We played the piano, Daddy, together." Richard smiled, kneeling down to their height. "I saw you were both amazing," the boys beamed. "Can we play again? Maybe here?" "Of course," he said softly, glancing toward Clara, who stood quietly by the doorway. "Maybe we'll even get one for the house." Her eyes widened slightly. "A piano, sir?" "Yes," he said. "They've earned it." Leo clapped his hands in delight. Liam ran to Clara and hugged her waist. "Miss Clara, you heard that? We'll have our own piano!" Clara smiled, resting her hand gently on his shoulder. "I heard, sweetheart." Richard watched them, the way Liam looked up at her, the way Leo leaned against her side without hesitation. The trust between them was clear. For the first time, he realized just how much of his son's world revolved around this woman, who had quietly devoted herself to their care. "Clara," he said after a pause, "I saw the video. I know you didn't plan it, but—" "Thank you," she blinked, startled. "Thank you, sir," he nodded, "for giving my boys a moment of childhood, for letting them be free. I forget sometimes that not everything has to be scheduled." Clara lowered her eyes modestly. "They were just being themselves, sir. I only watched." "That's exactly why it mattered," he said softly. There was a pause, a quiet, meaningful silence that filled the room like music. Then, to everyone's surprise, Richard said, "You've done more than just take care of them. You've given them something I couldn't: balance. I'd like to make sure you never feel like just an employee in this house." Clara looked up, speechless. "Sir, He raised his hand gently. "No, please. It's the least I can do. You're part of this family, Clara. And I think it's time I treated you that way." Her eyes shimmered with emotion, but she said nothing. Instead, she bowed her head slightly and smiled. "Thank you, sir." That means more than you know." The twins, unaware of the weight of the conversation, began humming the little tune they had made at the mall. Richard listened, smiling faintly. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. Alive, honest, unpolished. He walked to the window, looking out over the vast city below, his empire shining under the afternoon sun. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like an achievement. It felt like a distraction. What mattered most felt like a distraction. What mattered most wasn't out there. It was here, in this room. His sons, their laughter, and the woman who had unknowingly reminded him what life was truly about. As the boys played an imaginary keyboard on the table, Clara laughed, her voice gentle and warm. Richard turned back toward them, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. That night he canceled his dinner meeting. Instead, he spent the evening at home, for once, not as a businessman, but as a father. And when the twins later drifted to sleep, he found himself replaying the video one last time, not as a viral clip, not as a public spectacle, but as a quiet miracle. A moment of music that had changed everything. The weeks that followed were like a quiet sunrise in the Hale mansion, soft, warm, and full of new beginnings. The world outside was still talking about the viral video of the billionaire's twin sons and their maid. But inside the mansion, something far more meaningful had changed. Richard Hale kept his promise. Within days, a glossy black grand piano was delivered to the living room, the same make and model as the one from the mall. When the movers uncovered it, Leo and Liam gasped in wonder. "It's just like the one we played," Leo shouted, running his small hands along the smooth surface. Liam touched the keys carefully, pressing one to hear the familiar, gentle sound. "It's ours now?" he asked softly. Richard smiled, kneeling down beside them. "Yes," he said. "It's yours, so you can play whenever you want." The twins cheered, and Clara, standing nearby, couldn't stop herself from smiling. She still wore her simple uniform, but somehow it no longer felt like just work clothes. She felt part of something, part of a family. Every evening after that, the house would fill with the sound of piano notes. Sometimes Leo played bold and loud, experimenting with rhythm. Other times, Liam's careful fingers made soft, tender melodies. Clara often sat beside them, helping turn the pages of their beginner's songbook. Though half the time the boys ignored the notes and made up their own tunes instead. One evening, as the soft glow of sunset spread through the tall windows, Richard stood quietly in the doorway watching them play. His sons were laughing, their faces glowing in the orange light. Clara was laughing too, not her polite, quiet laugh, but one that came from deep inside, full of joy. It was a scene of warmth and peace, a picture he realized he had never painted for his family before. A few days later, the mall where it had all begun decided to honor the moment. The management placed a small golden plaque beside the piano that read, "Here 2 little boys played a song that reminded everyone what joy sounds like." When Clara saw it, she felt tears well in her eyes. The twins stood proudly beside it, posing for a photo as Richard watched, smiling. People in the mall still recognized them. Strangers came up to say kind things, to tell them how much their music had meant. But what mattered most wasn't the fame or the attention. It was what had grown quietly between them. Understanding, closeness, love. At home, Richard spent more time with his sons. He began working fewer late nights, joining them for breakfast, sometimes even sitting beside the piano while they played. Clara noticed the difference, and the boys seemed happier, calmer, more confident. They had found something more valuable than talent. They had found connection. One night when the twins were asleep, Richard found Clara in the kitchen tidying up. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "I've been thinking about that day at the mall." Clara smiled. "I still can't believe it happened, sir," he chuckled softly. "Neither can I, but I'm glad it did. It changed everything." She nodded, her eyes warm. "Sometimes the best moments aren't planned, they just happen." He looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "Thank you again, Clara, for being there when they needed you, and for reminding me what really matters." Her throat tightened and she looked down to hide the tears in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me, sir. They're wonderful boys. It's a joy to take care of them," he smiled. "Still, thank you." A month later, the twins had their first real piano lesson. Their teacher, a gentle old man, listened to them play and said with a grin, "These two have something special. You can't teach heart, and they already have it. Clara, sitting nearby, smiled proudly. She remembered that first day at the mall. The nervousness, the fear of breaking rules, and then the magic that followed. That moment had started all of this. Not just their love for music, but a new bond between them all. As the lesson ended, Leo turned to her and said, "Miss Clara, do you think we'll be famous one day?" She laughed softly. "Maybe," she said. "But even if you're not, you'll still make people smile. And that's better than being famous." Liam looked up, thoughtful. "Like we did that day at the mall?" "Yes," she said gently, her voice full of warmth. "Exactly like that." That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Clara stood alone by the piano. The room was quiet, the city lights twinkling through the window. She pressed a single key, letting the note ring softly in the stillness. She thought about how one simple outing, a moment she had almost tried to stop, had changed everything. Now the mansion didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive, full of laughter and music. The boys were thriving. Their father had returned to them, not as the busy man behind the desk, but as a dad who smiled, listened, and played along. And Clara? She no longer saw herself as just a maid. She was a part of their story. The woman who had been there when two little boys discovered music and, in doing so, brought their family back together. She smiled quietly, whispering to herself, "It really did amaze everyone." Then she turned off the lights, leaving the piano gleaming softly in the moonlight. A silent witness to a day that began with an ordinary trip to the mall and ended with a melody that changed their lives forever. Their lives forever.